Yo, I'm Dunmere, top 100 Overwatch player, and here is a DPS tier list and balance patch discussion for Season 3 of Overwatch 2. Alright, starting off with Junkrat, we have some slight reductions to his concussion mine damage. It was 120 before, and now it's 100. So, like I said, this is a little bit of a nerf, but it's not that impactful because it doesn't change his ability to continue doing these frag launcher concussion mine one-shot combos on 200 HP characters. This capability to just one-shot things at distance is part of why he's getting a surprisingly high amount of value in the games that I'm seeing him in, and is part of what is going to put him pretty high up on this tier list. Now, if you'd asked me when Overwatch 1 was transitioning over to Overwatch 2, whether I would have expected Junkrat to be like a good pick, and I would have probably placed him a little bit lower. However, there's another factor that I wasn't considering quite as much, is that there's just not a second tank to take care of him. I was playing a game today, and there was just so much damage being pumped in. And even though I was playing Winston into Junkrat and into things that I was relatively good into, anywhere I went, I was just taking so much damage, just because there's not anything to stop it. Because if I'm not doing that as like a main tank playing Reinhardt or Diva walking down holding my DM, then it's going to be difficult, right? And so my whole team is just taking random damage shots. And so when the Junkrat's just spamming, there's like damage going everywhere. And then when he gets close enough to someone, he's able to hit them with a one-shot combo. The trap is of course pretty powerful, especially if you use it to like zone areas. And his ultimate is also surprisingly strong because same sort of thing. The ultimate has the same amount of HP that it used to. And so there's one less person to shoot it now. And there's one less tanky character that can afford to spend more time trying to kill it, right? So Junkrat is actually quite more solid than he should be. And Junkrat's going to be getting put towards like the very top of plain hot dog. It depends on like which map you're playing on, right? If you're playing on something like King's Row, especially on like first point defense, that's a really good map point for Junkrat, and you're just getting these really nice corridors, able to lock down portions of the map, small rooms and things like that. Then he's gonna be getting knocked up. But gosh, maybe I shouldn't have said it like that, but he's getting middle plain hot dog with standard gameplay and gets knocked up into like lower mid cool if you're really good with him or you're on a good map. Next we have Mei, who had her ultimate cost reduced by 5%. This buff isn't really enough to change her from being kind of a low pick, to be completely honest. I did know that Mei was going to struggle coming into Overwatch 2. She definitely had good synergy when playing with like these powerful brawl comps of like a Diva, Reinhardt sort of brawl comp, but that of course is no longer in the game, and there's less for her to be dealing with essentially, and so there's also fewer situations to play her. However, her biggest nerf of course was the fact that she no longer freezes with her primary fire. So when I'm playing against Mei, basically on any character, if she runs into me and starts beaming me down, which by the way does a lot of damage, regardless of that, I'm just looking at her like, oh yeah, I'm getting slowed, but I'm just gonna go jump away, or I'm just gonna hook you and kill you, right? Of course, there are some situations to be playing Mei, but in general, she's just really not that good still. There's something fundamentally that she's lacking, which of course is the ability to play with these strong brawl compositions from Overwatch 1 type of thing, and also the ability to freeze things and just shoot them in the head with an icicle. So Mei is going to be getting a pretty low rating here, towards like the very bottom of that feeling when you wake up, but you don't get to sleep in. And like I said, it's towards the lower area. If it's on a bad map for Mei, then she's so garbage, like, ugh. And if you're playing on a situation where she's really good, like Control Center for Lijiang Tower, then it's not terrible and she gets higher up. For Pharah, she also gets a reduction in her ultimate cost by 5%. And that's beneficial, of course, but it's nothing really too crazy. Now, where does this actually leave Pharah in the meta and in Overwatch 2? She's honestly just not that great. Similarly to Mei, where you want to have something that you want to be able to play into Brawl and punish Brawl with her, Pharah doesn't really get that many opportunities because there's fewer enemies to be clumping up together. So basically, whereas in Overwatch 1, you're sitting there and you're like, oh, they have a Reinhardt, a Zarya, let's go play Pharah and just sit on top of them and just chunk them down for damage, get my ults up really fast, secure kills, and get a lot of value out of that. But in Overwatch 2, that's not happening nearly as often. And so instead of that, you're looking at a situation where you have like your hit scans just sitting there clicking you in the face. Also, Pharah got indirectly nerfed a lot this last patch because of the Mercy changes. Mercy used to consistently heal herself up over time, more with her old passive, it was 50% more. So instead of getting 15 or 22 per second after waiting 1 second of not taking damage, she now gets 15. And before, when she used her Valkyrie, she would get 22 per second constantly, no matter the damage she was taking. And now she doesn't get that at all. And she only is able to get it if she's healing something. So what this means for Pharah is if you're playing Pharah Mercy, which is obviously the best way to play her and more like really the only way to play her, you can just focus down the Mercy and the Pharah can't really do anything about it. Whereas before, the Mercy had better options to heal herself, like she'd hold on to her Valkyrie, she starts taking damage, she pops it, and then she just doesn't die. Now that's not the case. So unless your enemies are not doing the correct thing, where if they're shooting both the Pharah and the Mercy, then she can heal herself. But if they're just choosing to shoot the Mercy, then the Mercy can't get healed at all. Like I said, today I was playing a game with that, and I was just sitting there laughing and watching this poor little Mercy player just sit there and die because the Pharah wasn't taking any damage, so she couldn't heal anything, right? And so this situation all being put together, especially with characters like Sojourn being really, really powerful right now, is putting Pharah in a really bad position, and I genuinely think she's like the worst DPS in the game. She fundamentally is kind of always getting outplayed as a character with the way the Overwatch has been developing, but this is where she is. Now, again, if you're playing on console, this is changing a little bit. You're going to be getting her a little bit higher up. If you're on a map or you're in a situation in which all the enemies don't have any hit scan players, and so you're sitting there and you're playing into like I don't know, like a Reinhardt, Junkrat, Symmetra, then yeah, go ahead and play Pharah and you get a lot of value. But as soon as they swap to a hit scan, then that goes away, right? And if you don't have a Mercy player, then don't even bother playing her in the first place at all. Now for Reaper. Reaper got a little bit of a change to his Death Blossom, with the ultimate cost being reduced by 8%. That's a decent buff, but it's not really going to change things too much, though he's already quite strong overall. This might seem a little bit surprising because Reaper's kind of looked at this like character for noobs who just walks up and shoots bad players in the head and wins, right? But that's not really how he is right now. In Overwatch 2, there's a lot of healing going on. Characters are having a difficult time dying. The tanks in the game are just like these bullet sponges now, which I don't really like, but that's how they are. And playing with a character like Ramatra or especially Orisa, they just kind of don't ever die. And so what is really, really, really just guaranteeing value and being like the answer for what makes a character meta or not is just like what flat value they put out on the table. And with Reaper, he puts a lot of that out, which is just this powerful, powerful damage. So if you're in a situation, which is most games, to be honest, where you just want to be able to just win by your own capability and just kill through that sustain, Reaper is like getting a surprisingly high amount of value in this area. And this goes for all ranks. For high ranks, he's getting put like even in the top ranks, right? Like I'm talking like top 100 games, he's still viable. In those situations, yeah, you might need like a little bit of support from like a Lucio speeding him in or something like that, but he's still getting in like the middle top tier of cool here, because he's actually like surprisingly strong, like I said. However, if you're in a lower rank, he's gonna be getting even better. The higher you get into the rank, the more you're gonna get focus as Reaper, because that's what you need to do, kill him through his sustain. And the lower you get in the tiers, the harder it is for players to do that. So Reaper gets a lot of value at lower ranks. Like he's honestly like one of the best characters in the game at lower ranks, but even in high tiers, he's still like quite consistent and quite powerful, because you know, you're playing like some of these other characters, like I don't know, maybe what's a good one? Well, I mean, Sombra, right? Sombra, Symmetra, and you're playing like Soldier, you're playing against like an Orisa. It's like, okay, well, I need to go behind her and go kill whatever around there, and you're gonna have a harder time doing that. But with Reaper, it's like, I can kill whatever I want. Orisa, come here, I'm gonna start punching you in the face. And then you actually have to think about what you're doing when you're playing Orisa against a Reaper or something like that. And Reaper counters a lot of things that are a lot of the tanks that are meta right now. He's really good into, well, he's like I said, he's solid into Orisa. She doesn't really die anyway, but he's solid into Orisa. You have to be careful about him, about the Orisa stunning you on your ult though. But good into Orisa, good into Ramatra, and then really good into Winston. Probably one of Winston's biggest counters at the moment, considering the other ones were nerfed, aside from Roadhog. So that's the state of Reaper. All right, now for the character that's going to get me in trouble no matter what I call him, we have Cassidy. So he did actually get a couple of buffs. They're not crazy substantial, but they are decent. His primary fire fall-off range has been increased from 20 to 25 meters, so a little bit of a buff there. And his combat roll is no longer blocked by enemy player collisions, so you can go through enemies when you use it, which is pretty useful in case you're getting body blocked in like a doorway or something like that, but nothing super crazy. However, Cassidy's always been in a solid position overall. because of the fact that he just outputs like generally consistent, solid damage. He's able to just sit there, poke at enemies at mid-range, and with the buffs and changes to the way his combat role works, where he can use it in the air, allowing him to get in a lot of better positions, the fact that it also reduces his damage taken during it, and then also the massive buffs to his ultimate, making him have reduced damage during it, are putting him in actually like quite a solid position. I wouldn't say necessarily that you're going to be seeing him getting played in the Overwatch League. I don't think you will, because they're going to be playing Sojourn probably still, or something else. But he's still quite powerful overall, and therefore he's being put up like around Reaper position sort of thing. Like I said, you're playing Cassidy, like in any situation that you're playing Cassidy, you kind of know that you're going to have guaranteed value, right? He's a safe pick in most situations, or like all situations. Going into a game, like playing on defense, not knowing what you're going to play into, picking Cassidy is not something you really have to be worried about doing. He's very good at everything. He's hard to dive now with the fact that he's taking this reduced damage, and his little magnetic grenade is actually quite decent at bullying off tanks, and then also at securing one-shot combo kills. So Cassidy's pretty good overall. Consistently good through like all ranks too. So for Soldier 76, he did get actually 2 changes that are making him even better. The first one is that the number of shots to reach maximum recoil was increased from 4 to 6. And then the second one is that his recoil was reduced by 12%, which is actually quite solid overall. It's just making it so he's going to be even more effective at longer ranges, and it's going to be even easier to hit shots. So that's all really cool. Now, Soldier 76 is kind of in a weird one. I know he's a lot of people's favorite character, just how it feels pretty solid to track and run around and do whatever with him, and people have forced him because of that. But I also think he's kind of been a sleeper pick throughout recent time periods in Overwatch. He has massive damage, like he has a lot of damage over time. Now, it's not really the most valuable thing, but with certain situations in which you are able to hit proper flanks and just output this damage and farm your ultimate, combo that with your rockets, you can do a lot in Soldier 76. Soldier 76 gets this sort of consistent annoying value, kind of like Tracer does, because you are a flanker. Well, kind of, you're like a mid-range flanker, right? And like I said, Soldier 76 can just do a lot. And Soldier 76 has a high skill expression because of the aim, and especially with the buffs to his ultimate. And if you're throwing on like combos with an Ana, so if you're playing with an Ana player too, you can do a lot on Soldier 76. So yes, while he's not like super crazy, he's not Dan Girl kind of level or cool or plain hot dog or whatever. I mean, okay, he is actually plain hot dog. I messed that up, but anyway, he is plain hot dog. He's somewhere towards the middle tier of plain hot dog. If your aim is bad, then he's going lower. If your aim is cracked out, then you're gonna go higher. If you're playing with an Ana, it's even, you know, you're doing pretty good, right? You just know that he's consistent. He's hard to dive to with his healing. So he's getting put in like middle tier of plain hot dog. Moving on to Sombra, she had 2 buffs. The first one was an increase in her primary fire damage from 7 to 7.5 per shot, so that's a little bit of a buff there. And then the time she hacks health packs for was increased from 30 to 45 seconds, which is honestly really annoying when you're playing Wrecking Ball. So yeah, in the best situation to play Sombra, she got a lot, well, she got, you know, somewhat better, right? However, she's still trash, to be completely honest with you guys. After the most recent nerfs that were like quite hard on her, she's just not been there. She's always been a character that's been difficult to play in like everything below the absolute top tier, essentially. And even in the top tier, it's like, oh, we have a Sombra on your team, and you're like, oh, okay, well, time to base my whole play style around it. I hope we have 5 people on my team who are like high tier level players who understand how to play around it, right? And when you're comparing her to something like Tracer, it's always been like, well, she just doesn't have this raw output value that Tracer does. Her hacks aren't as substantial anymore. Like, I don't really get concerned playing Wrecking Ball into her like I used to in Overwatch 1, where you had to be really careful with it. So it's just not anywhere near what she used to be. And like I said, in like the vast majority of ranks, you're guaranteed to get more value on another character. But even in like the highest ranks, you're looking at a situation where it just requires too much teamwork, and her maximum value just isn't even really that high to start with anyway. So like I said, if you're at the highest ranks, then she's like more towards the mid or lower, that feeling when you wake up but you don't get to sleep in. But for realistic play, I think she's just pretty garbage, to be honest. Like, I mean, yeah, she does some damage still, and her ult's like more, not more powerful than it used to be, but it's more guaranteed value. So yeah, and if you're good, she gets buffed up a little bit, but just don't use Sombra, guys. This is just not really the play right now. Moving on to Symmetra, we have an ultimate cost increase by 10%, so she got a nerf on that area. Granted, it's one of the most powerful ultimates in the game, so she kind of deserves this, but maybe they should have given her something else to compensate for that. However, this is what Symmetra is now. She is kind of in an awkward situation where she's strong on very, very specific situations, like Lijiang Tower, particularly Night Market, but in general, she's just not very good. Any sort of situation in which there's a lot of open areas, you're going to be struggling on her. I know there are sim players who just run around and have fun and just go do whatever they want. And so she's not like absolutely terrible, but she just doesn't get some of the raw value of some other characters. And doesn't get the raw value of some of these other like flex DPS type characters of Junkrat, Torbjorn, Echo, that kind of thing. So like I said, yes, she's strong, and I don't get like upset when I see a Symmetra player on my team, but if it's a certain map, I know that it's just going to put us at a huge disadvantage. So we have a Symmetra player on Havana, not looking too hot sort of thing. So because of that, it's being put in a situation where in the higher ranks on those very specific maps, like, yeah, good, right? But in average play, not that amazing. Better than in high tiers though, because Symmetra can just walk forward and beam people down. But she's being put at like very high, that feeling when you wake up but you can't sleep in, like very high, maybe towards very low plain hot dog. We'll say very low plain hot dog. So for Torbjorn, he got a little bit of a nerf. His turret base health is being reduced from 250 to 225, which I'm honestly really happy about because I don't like playing against Torbjorn. I think he's actually really, really strong, and he's a hard counter to tanks in a lot of situations. Not much a hard counter, but he's like quite a counter to a lot of tanks in a lot of situations, particularly when he throws out his little gooey droplets of whatever. So yeah, but that's not quite what we're talking about. Torbjorn is surprisingly strong. He has a lot more value than most people think. Like I think people way underestimate him. His primary fire damage is really solid if you're hitting those little shots. You can run up during the middle of, like towards the beginning of fights before they're happening, just throw shots down, charge your ultimate up really quick, put your turrets on off angles to punish characters that are strong in the meta like Tracer and Winston, and just get a lot of value out of it. And it's just, when you're playing a Torbjorn, it's just consistent value, even in the top levels of the ranks, right? Like I understand the lower you get in the tiers, the less people are gonna just shoot the turret when it shows up, right? And it maybe at the very bottom of bronze, there's turrets just living whole game is just sitting there killing people over the whole time, right? But Torbjorn is really, really powerful. The pressure that he puts on the most important character in the game, the tank, is uncomparable to a lot of the other DPS characters. So Torb is being put at the very top of plain hot dog. And if it's a good map for him, it gets even higher for sure. And also in a lot of situations, like I'm saying, just playing against a Tracer, go Torb. Playing against a Winston, go Torb. So, yeah. So now we have Widowmaker, who is getting the Blizzard Seesaw experience of her health being tossed between 200 and 175 constantly. Now it's being nerfed down to 175, which I'm glad about because I wish she wasn't in the game. To be honest with you guys, I think she shouldn't exist in the game. But going on from this, Widowmaker is in a situation where obviously the higher you get in the ranks, the more powerful she gets. So you take this with a huge grain of salt. If you're in a low rank, don't play Widowmaker. If you're in a really high rank, then definitely you can play Widowmaker on certain situations, right? Also, it's a console PC sort of thing. On console, it's a lot harder to play Widowmaker, so go on ahead and consider lowering her a few ranks or rank in my tier list here. But Widowmaker getting this health nerf is somewhat substantial, but what is really going to be putting her further down the tiers is just that she has competition with Sojourn for the same position, and her counters are getting buffed. So because Winston is getting indirectly buffed by Roadhog not being played as much, and because Wrecking Ball got huge buffs, Widowmaker's not looking too hot in general. On like a map like Havana or one of these situations where there's lots of open sight lines, then yeah, I mean, she's honestly just like a must pick if you're good enough at her, right? But in realistic situations on like any given map, she's just really not that good, like low plain hot dog now. Widowmaker's in a really weird situation where depending on how hard she's getting countered, is really just knocking her further down. Like if she doesn't have any counters in the game, then she's just the best thing in the game. But if there are things that are countering her, she gets knocked down. Like it just becomes so annoying and painful to play her that you just see her consistently less and less and less. So it's not really so much about her raw potential, but really more about the fact that it's becoming less likely and likely to occur. Also, like I said, with Sojourn, you have a character who has a better escape than Widowmaker, has a better ability to toss some AoE damage in, but most importantly has the same one-shot potential more or less, but can do it at much better situations, right? Like she can play more aggressively. She's much less vulnerable to a Wrecking Ball diving onto her. Wrecking Ball dives Widowmaker, slams her, maybe slams her out of her hook, whatever. Actually, I don't think that works. But you know, slams her, puts damage into her, gets a lot of pressure onto her, and she can't do anything other than focus on the ball. But for Sojourn, she just uses her little slide and gets through anything and whatever, you know, she does her thing. So Widowmaker is looking like, for the average player, here. For high tier, lower playing hot dog. For good maps though, go ahead and play Widow, you know? But so she's generally mid tier. Now for Ashe, she didn't get any balance changes this patch, but in my opinion is quite a powerful sleeper pick. Back in Overwatch 1, before people realized Ashe was good, I thought that she was really, really powerful because of the fact that she has very consistent damage, she has AoE pressure with her dynamite, she has the ability to get high grounds, the ability to push enemies away and stop divers from diving onto her, and then she has a tank that can be spawned from her ultimate that was better than all the tanks in the game at the time. Now this is all the same for Ashe now, right? And the only reason we're not playing her as like a hard meta pick is because Sojourn exists. Because Sojourn does more or less the majority of the same stuff, but just slightly better with the one-shot potential. However, regardless of that, Ashe is still really, really good. Like I said, she has the ability to just consistently put out damage from mid-tier distance. Her dynamite, while it only has 5 targets to hit now, is still good pressure to counter some of the constant sustain that's going on in the game. And her coach gun can still stop people from diving her, particularly like a Winston, considering it just stops her momentum if you like touch them with it like at all, right? And she has Bob still, and there is one less tank to deal with Bob, so he's even stronger in a lot of ways, right? Now you're spawning 100% of your total tank capacity when you throw him out, whereas before you were only spawning an additional 50%. So Ashe is honestly really, really strong. And like I said, if Sojourn gets nerfed, I really would not be surprised to see Ashe become hard meta again, to be completely honest. And so she's at the very, very top of cool. Like there's a pretty healthy gap between Ashe and like these guys. Like they're like high mid tier of this, and then Ashe is like at the very top, to be honest. Now we have the new and kind of improved Bastion. Bastion didn't get any changes this patch either, but he is in an also interesting position, kind of similar to the way that Symmetra is, sort of. And that is because he is very, very good at countering very specific heroes, which is Winston. When I play Winston and I have to play against Bastion, he's not quite as bad as it used to be in Overwatch 1, where you had absolutely no recourse against him as a Winston, but he is very hard to play against now. In general, he's not really that good, to be completely honest, but he's really useful as a situational swap when you're playing against a Winston. So if you are playing against a Winston, which will be a meta character, and they're just getting a lot of value and they're just terrorizing your team and jumping around and primaling and then using all the little voice lines on you, then feel free to swap into Bastion. Like I said, he gets consistent value overall. He has great ability to access high grounds with his little bomb jumps, which are pretty cool. And his ultimate is getting more value than I feel like it should. Like I feel like Bastion players in the enemy team just pop it and my team dies for some reason. But regardless of all that, in a higher tier, not really that good. To counter Winston, amazing. For the average player, better, because Bastion is getting less time being focused and stuff like that, so you do get more value overall. And so Bastion is going to be getting put down in like a very low playing hot dog. Not, like I said, because he's good for countering. If you're looking for just like standard gameplay against other things, Cassidy does a lot of what he does, but just consistently better. So yeah, use him to counter Winston, or don't when you're playing against me, because I don't want you to do that. As for Echo, she didn't get any balance changes this patch either. Now with Echo, I think she's a pretty generally average character overall. A lot of it has to do with the fact that she got some pretty heavy nerfs recently with the ability for her to copy tanks, and she no longer gets full HP for them, making it worse to copy tanks. And really a lot of the problem is just how there's a lot more power in the hit scans in the game now, right? So you have Sojourn, who's not technically a hit scan, but she has her one-shot capability. You have Cassidy, Ashe, Widowmaker, all just sitting there kind of beaming her out of the sky. And so that makes her pretty average. You could get a lot of value with her beam and with her stickies and with her primary fires into tanks and burning them down as like a pure value for that. Granted, you're not able to use them to charge as much. So again, pretty average just in general. However, she did recently get some pretty hefty nerfs because she's no longer as good with Mercy. Mercy, like I've been saying with the same situation with Pharah, because Mercy no longer is able to just get this free regen health when she is using her Valkyrie, and she gets reduced health from her passive now, so she only gets 15 per second instead of 22 after not taking damage for 1 second. She is a lot more vulnerable when playing with a Pharah or an Echo, so you're gonna see a lot less of that. And Echo definitely benefited from having that pocket. So when you're playing with or against an Echo Mercy, you can just shoot the Mercy and not shoot the Echo, and the Mercy doesn't get the healing, and the Mercy just dies, and the Echo's like, oh, okay, well, that's unlucky, and we shouldn't have gone on such an aggressive angle. But like I've been saying, as you get higher up the ranks, she gets worse. So when you're up at the top and you're having to play against a lot of really good hit scan players who are playing these hit scans, it's going to be looking kind of like just not really good pick, to be honest. But in the lower areas, that becomes a lot less capable of the enemies to shoot you, and so she gets a lot better, where she's getting more towards like somewhere around here, right, where there's like a pretty hefty difference between these three and then these four, but that's about what she's looking in general, right? Now going on to Hanzo, who also didn't get any balance changes. I think he's a lot better than people think he is. I've been looking at other people's tier lists, and a lot of people put him at a very, very low rating. Like they put him like where I put Pharah and Sombra kind of thing. But I just don't really think that's how he truly is. He has one-shot potential, which is just broken in Overwatch. He has consistent damage with his storm arrows that can also ricochet, so you get extra value from that. He has good ability to get information with his sonic arrow, especially if you use the sonic arrow and then use the bouncing storm arrow to hit it around an angle like you're playing Valorant. He has a lot of capability with that. His dragon is also obviously not as crazy unless if you're not playing with the Zarya, but it's still quite solid nonetheless. And so like I said, I think people just kind of look down on him and think that because there's not as much stability to Overwatch now, where you don't have like two tanks to just sit there and kind of farm their heads as much, or protect him while he's doing his little sniper angling, that he's just not as good. But I think Hanzo is quite solid overall, and honestly, I think and would put him generally around the same category as like Soldier 76, where yes, there's better picks, but if I see a Hanzo on my team, I'm not going to be getting kind of disappointed, right? Like, yes, would I rather have an Ashe or would I rather have a Sojourn than Hanzo? Yes. On a lot of maps, would I rather, like on those very particular maps, like Havana, would I rather have Widowmaker? Yes. But if I'm playing on a map like Ilios Ruins, then I'd probably rather have the Hanzo, considering the buffs to Wrecking Ball are making it so Widowmaker is a lot worse, right? So Hanzo can slot in a little bit and take some of the burden off of Widowmaker's shoulders on those maps, and not be as vulnerable to Ball either, and Winston. So on to the she-demon evil character that ruined Overwatch 2's first few months, many people would say. We have Sojourn. And she didn't get any balance changes either, unfortunately, because Blizzard doesn't like doing that, I guess. But yeah, she's crazy busted. Yeah, guys, that's the whole video. Just kidding, right? She has crazy potential to one-shot at a very consistent, aggressive range. Because of the fact that she has crazy movement and she can just slide away and nothing but a hard CC will stop her. She can play in really, really aggressive positions, angle aggressively onto enemies, get that Sojourn, get that Gauss cannon rifle thing up, and then just click on something's head and they die, right? Very powerful. Then she also has just even more of that in her ultimate, and she has a fun little AoE damage thing that she doesn't even really need. But yeah, not to mention she can just jump to high grounds whenever she wants to, because I guess that should be a thing too, right? But yeah, you don't need to know more. You don't need to know more. Sojourn's crazy. Have fun, I guess. Maybe, I don't know. And now we have Genji, who also didn't get any balance changes, despite all the memes I was seeing on my channel, people saying something and then saying, okay, now we need to nerf Genji because of this. Blizzard logic, but yeah. So Genji is not really that strong right now, to be completely honest. He loses out to other diving characters with this just raw potential output. He loses out to Tracer, who plays a very similar situation, and having a lot less just general mobility, right? Where Tracer has 3 blinks and the recall, and can go flank, pressure things from range. Genji can't really do that, and he's kind of just looking for opportunities to dive onto, or farming his blade, or doing whatever. So, like I said, not really great in that situation. And if you're looking for like a raw, pure damage output, you should be playing something like Reaper or Ashe instead. And really, if you're looking for those kills, just play Sojourn, right? I mean, honestly, everything is just play Sojourn for any of these characters, but Genji's just not really that good. He's pretty even throughout all the skill ratings for how he ranks, and it's just not really that hot, to be honest. Like I say, I'd put him over Mei, because I feel like the people who play Genji are pretty good at him, but he's just not really that good. And there's not really like a situation where you want to play him to counter someone either, right? Because even if you want to, like, there's a Widowmaker and you want to try and counter him because your tanks aren't doing it, you should just go Hanzo or Widowmaker or Ashe or Sojourn and just deal with it. And be putting out a lot more value towards your team anyway. Maybe not Ashe, because Ashe kind of was just a Widowmaker depending on range, but Sojourn. Just go back to Sojourn. So Genji's not really getting the hottest ranking here. Kind of just generally in that feeling when you wake up but don't get to sleep in, which is one of the things I hate the most in my life. All right, now we have Tracer, and Tracer didn't get any balance changes, but she's kind of wild. A lot of people sleep on her a little bit, but I don't really think they should be sleeping on her a bit when she's been meta for a very long time in a lot of situations. Like even when certain characters came out and they're like, oh, Sombra's busted, and then you see in Overwatch League they're playing Tracer for a reason, right? She is a very high skill character, so I get why she gets less value throughout the majority of the ranks, but considering the buffs that she's gotten to her damage and stuff like that, she's still very solid just in general. For the very highest of ranks, she is right there up to next to Sojourn. Like, well, not right up there. She's pretty lower in there, considered Sojourn's just crazy and one-shots everything, but she is still one of the best DPS in the game. In general, like general ranks, I'd put her more like middle cool, or like if you're not that great, the top of plain hot dog. But in general, she's getting put, or just for the core purpose of what I'm going to be rating her as, she's getting put at the very, very top. So Tracer's kind of busted, TBH. So now for some fun things, I wanted to talk about why this tier list is the way it is and how it heavily relates to what Overwatch 2 has transformed into, which is honestly kind of just a deathmatch. So way back when Overwatch 1 came out, there was a lot of nuance to all the characters, and you played heavily for producing advantages with slow damage over time with characters like Soldier 76, which then transformed into these very niche, unique, high complexity dive compositions, right? And as they added more sustain to the game and they added more random super complex characters in the game, that kind of started transitioning. But when Overwatch 2 happened and the reduction of the tanks, and with the complexity of all the characters being how they are, it came down to a situation where you just gotta kill things, right? And I know that sounds kind of weird coming from someone who's played like at the top of the game, right? Even as like a tank player. And yes, obviously, of course, it's a lot more than that, kind of. It's kind of like it starts off like just kill things, and then it gets towards like mid tiers of this understanding, and people are like, no, you gotta do all this complexity, you gotta do all this sort of stuff, and then it goes back down to just being like, you just gotta kill things, bro. And honestly, if you look at all this tier list, it honestly comes down to a combination of how easily something can kill something, and not necessarily kill something, but how, like, what is the raw pure value you just slap down? Like, not the value you have to like work really hard and do complex nuanced things to get, but what is just the value, right? And so you look at a character like Sojourn, you have one shot. Look at a character like Tracer, you have massive mobility, able to flank and just bully and distract and deal lots of damage and secure kills, right? And it basically goes further and further down the line to where you get to a situation where you don't have that as consistently, right? And you take that raw output potential and then you multiply that by what is in the meta that is going to be stopping that from occurring, right? So Widowmaker has the most flat raw potential of any character, but then we have Wrecking Ball and Winston jumping onto her and stopping her from doing that, so she gets knocked down lower, right? But in general, You can see that throughout this tier list. Like I said, you have these that are just crazy high value. Then you have, oh, well, she has even more consistent value, but not the one-shots and not as much of the mobility as Sojourn. Reaper does big damage, 5-head. Cassidy does consistent big damage, 5-head. And then it's the same sort of thing. Consistent damage, tank pressure. Consistent damage, but not quite as much on a lot of maps, right? Or against certain hit scan characters. Doesn't have the same sort of burst, the same sort of consistent one-shot potential that some of these do, and not as much mobility. Same sort of thing. Has to hit their shots. A little bit harder to do consistently. Echo gets bullied by these hit scans, right? Has a lot of high potential with her ability to sticky things and then beam them down, but is getting stopped by like Sojourn, Ashe, and Cassidy, right? Symmetra doesn't have as much of the same potential. Has to get in closer, has to play based on the geometry of the map a lot more, has to play more situational. We talked about Widowmaker already. With Bastion, it's just like, it doesn't have as much of the raw potential, like has the raw potential of just this damage, but is a very big vulnerable target during that, so he's easy to kill, so it doesn't get to like actually do it. With Genji, you're getting knocked down where it's like less damage, less mobility, much less one-shot potential, has a lot more nuance. Same thing with Mei, very map dependent, needs a sort of nuance. Sombra needs even more, and as we talked about, Pharah is like purely based on nuance and positioning, and there's a lot of things that are just stopping her from doing her job, like Cassidy, Tracer, and Sojourn, and Widowmaker, right? And so that's the general sort of way that the game has developed to a situation where it really is just frag out. And I'm not talking just with the DPS. If you were to go look at my tank guide or my tank tier list I did before, it really comes down to like, which of these is just putting out, is just like slapping down the money on the table and going, all right, here's this much raw potential. And so you have a character like Ramatra that's just like, oh, yeah, I don't die, by the way. Oh, and then I press my ultimate and you can't kill me still, but you're dying while I'm doing that. Oh, if I'm Orisa, oh, I don't die, ever. And I also can just stun anybody I want and get a lot of kills, right? Then it starts deteriorating a little bit down to where it's like some more nuance with Winston sort of thing. But even Winston has so much more frag potential now that Mercy got nerfed and the Roadhog is not being played as much, right? And exactly why Roadhog dropped too. Roadhog used to have, and why he was like the best tank before, is because anything he hooked died. And now it's just that raw potential. It's like, oh, if I hook something, they die. So anything in the threat range around me just dies. So yeah. And it's the same thing with supports. Which support are we playing? Not the nuanced one. We're not playing Zenyatta. We're not playing the one that needs things to play around him, even though he has huge potential too. We're playing the character Kiriko that does everything. And we're playing Ana that basically does everything too. And then we're playing Lucio, who has a lot of things too, right? Or really has the ability to protect the other ones that do a lot of things too, right? So yeah, that's my thought process for all of this. Like I said, it's really come down to no longer nuance, and a lot of that really has to do with the sustained values in the game. Whereas before, you could work hard and control positioning a lot and focus fire and play off of really small, nuanced conditions, essentially, that were really controlled a lot by positioning to get advantages, right? So if you're playing like Soldier 76 and your positioning gets a little bit better than the enemy Soldier 76, and you flank and you shoot Winston in the face like for a second and a half, right? You're looking at a situation where he's now half health, and you know that the healing in the game is very low, and so he's not gonna be able to get up to full health before the fight starts. And so the fight starts and he only has 400 of his 500 at the time HP. So you have now secured yourself an advantage. But with the way the game is now, that doesn't matter. There's so much sustain in the game that Winston is getting instantly healed up. So what you did is Soldier 76, the only thing it did for you was to give you your ult charge, right? And so then if you don't have this core killing potential in your kit now, if you don't have something that just like, I can just easily frag things and play super aggressively like Sojourn, I can stop anything bad happening like Kiriko, or I just don't ever die, and I can also just frag things out like Ramatra and Orisa, you're not meta. So yeah, guys, that's Overwatch 2 now. I wish they'd nerf the sustain. I've been talking about this for a long time. It's more fun for you support players too if they do it right. And then they lower like some of the potential for the tanks and the DPS and things like that. It's more fun. So everyone loved Overwatch when it first came out. But yeah, peace. Thanks so much for watching, and if I helped you out with this video, then help me out by hitting a subscribe. Thanks, guys.